Greetings everyone, Brett here with Hammerhead Model Making, back with another full build video. This video is going to be slightly different because I'm not building just one kit, I'm actually building four. And the reason why is because I got this decal sheet that came with three really colorful and neat looking liveries for the P-51 Mustang, and I figured why not just build all of them. And for this build I am using the Airfix 1/72 scale P-51D kit. This is probably one of my most favorite kits to build, and it's not the greatest kit on the market. It's not even the greatest Mustang kit on the market in this scale, but what I really like about it is, one, it's inexpensive. I can pick these up at my local Hobby Lobby for $10, or around $7 if it's on sale, which happens quite often. And it actually gives you quite a bit amount of detail and options out of the box. So for me, this is just one of those kits that, I've probably built about 10 of them so far, and I've still got like another 5 on my shelf to build. So this is just one of my favorite kits to build. And I kind of decided I'm just going to do this assembly line style. And so I wasn't going to add too much detail to the kit, although there is plenty of room for improvement on this kit. But basically what I was just going to do is just add some belts to the seats and just detail up the seats a little bit. Nothing terribly fancy. So I'm just using strips of masking tape as my seat belts here. Not even bothering with putting like buckle detail and stuff on it. And then just using tiny little bits of plastic to put these little supports on the side of the seat. And that's really about all the detail I'm going to add to this in terms of like scratch built detail. And but you could really go to town doing all kinds of fun things to this to really spruce up the kit. But out of the box, it's not too bad. I do recommend, when you're gluing the radiator part to the underside of the cockpit floor, is to fit the whole part into one of the fuselage halves, just to make sure everything gets aligned correctly. Otherwise, you might have trouble closing up the fuselage halves in the future. Construction is pretty simple and straightforward, so we're already moving on to paint for the interior. I'm just using this Vallejo primer and to prime the interior, just because I know I'm not really going to be doing any masking in here, and it's pretty easy and quick to apply. So we're just going to give everything a nice good coat of primer here. Make sure to fully coat the inside as well. There are a lot of areas where you can see inside of the fuselage, so just make sure you have that all covered. So basically here you can see all the things that I've primed, and times 4. So this is what I meant by the whole assembly line process here. So next up, we're going to add some interior color. So this is Ammo MIG's Zinc Chromate Interior Green. And we're just going to go ahead and get this all painted on. Again, pretty straightforward. Cockpit colors for Mustangs. There was a lot of variety to it. I'm just going to paint these all the same, just for the sake of making it easier on myself. And also because I didn't take the time to properly research each individual aircraft to see if there was known data regarding all of this information. There are a few areas on the Mustang that had a yellow primer, the zinc yellow primer, instead of the green primer. So here I'm just making sure to get those few spots. Mainly it's just the wheel wells that had this color that we would need to worry about in these builds here. So once all the base colors down, we can hit everything with a quick gloss coat so that we can prep it for a little bit of weathering. This kit is rather small, and as such, you really, unless you have the cockpit canopy opened, you're really not going to see a lot in there. So I'm just going to be really kind of focusing on doing a panel wash just to make some of those details pop on the interior. And so for this, I'm using the interior wash by Ammo MIG, and this does a pretty decent job of, without being too strong, of just adding a little bit of shadow to some of the recesses and popping out some of those details a little bit. So just going through everything, making sure everything has a nice good coat of this wash to hit all the crevices, and pretty straightforward. The wash is nice though, because once it dries, it's easy to remove. Here I'm adding the instrument panel decals. I would say this is probably unfortunate. This kit does not have raised detail on the instrument panel, so you don't have the option of painting it by hand if you wanted to. you have to use a decal, otherwise you just have kind of this blank surface, or you'd have to find some kind of aftermarket photo etcher, you know, if they make 3D decals for this size, I'm not sure. So the decal it's okay. It's rather bland. It doesn't have a lot of color. It's just the black and white. The Mustangs had a somewhat colorful instrument panel in real life, so it is unfortunate that you don't get the raised details, because you could, at the very least, you could have picked out some of the details with a brush. A little bit harder when it's just a flat surface, but still possible. Like I mentioned, once the wash is dry, all the excess can be removed with a cotton bud. It's just a simple matter of going around and swiping it away. Now I'm going to add a few more little colorful details to the seats here. This pad here underneath, I believe it was a flotation device. I could be wrong though. Painting it yellow, and then so this is just some Vallejo yellow. It takes a couple coats because the paint is somewhat translucent. It's hard to find good yellow brush paints, so it just took a couple coats. Now we can hit some of the other details with black instruments and various knobs and switches inside the cockpit here. The boot around the control stick would have been like a canvas material, and I've seen some sources say that it was more of like a khaki color. I've seen other sources say that it was colored black, so I chose black. Doing up the seat belts right now, doing this with just kind of a buff color, like a light gray buff color, and again, nothing really fancy here, but it does add a little bit. And then finally the headrest. Again, there's different sources on what these colors could have been. Most agree that it was a leather, and some say that it was brown leather, some say it was black leather. I went with brown just to contrast the black part of the headrest there anyways. So finally, just adding a little bit of scratch detail to the bottom of the cockpit floor here, where the wood floor would have been exposed underneath the paint. If I really wanted to go way more accurate, I would have sprayed on like the non-stick texture to it and then chipped it down to the wood. But again, with everything closed up, you really can't even see the cockpit floor at all. So this was good enough for me. Hitting all the large things with a little bit of a kind of a silver dry brush here, just to kind of pick out the edges and make those little details pop. With all that done, I can hit everything on the interior with a matte coat. So basically everything inside the aircraft got hit with the matte coat. This helps seal in my paint, and it also helps kind of balance the paint versus the wash, which have different sheens. So it just kind of makes everything nice and even. Hit the instrument panel here, and now we can install the gun sights. So this is actually a decent little detail that Airfix provides. I did actually clip off the one part that's supposed to remain clear, and I will replace that with some acetate sheet, just because it's much better scale effect than the thick clear plastic that has a giant seam line running down the middle. So now we can start getting everything installed and put together. A little bit of paint touch up on the gun sight. So there was a little leather pad on the front of the gun sight there, so that's just what I'm painting. And the actual gun sight glass I'll get installed later, right before I put the canopies on. So here you can see all the cockpits completed, all painted the same. Assembly of the rest of the aircraft is really straightforward and really doesn't have any issues. The kit's pretty well designed and engineered, so construction is pretty simple. I really like the Airfix plastic, and I know a lot of people don't. It's a softer plastic, and I just find it really easy to work with. I find it easy to sand, easy to blend joins and seams together. So I enjoy working with the Airfix plastic. I know many people don't, but right now I'm going to go ahead and get all the seams sanded. I choose to do it now before getting all the rest of the little bits installed. Just makes it easier and less likely to break something off or ruin something. So it's just a matter, right now I'm using a 400 grit sandpaper to kind of rough it out. And then I will also come back in later with a 600 grit, and then finally some like polishing sandpapers like 2000 grit and higher. This is restoring the lost panel lines from the sanding. So I'm just using this little micro saw to rescore the panel lines. And I like using the micro saw like this across curved surfaces like around the fuselage here. I find it much easier than using like a pin type scribing tool. Just easier to maintain a straight line between the two, the two sides without having to use a guide. And now I can restore some of the rivets, the lost rivet detail. So this is just an old airbrush needle. I believe this was like a 0.75 airbrush needle, rather large. And it's just chucked into a pin vise. So right now I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not really following anything specific. I'm not striving for extreme accuracy here. More just to kind of convey the message that the fasteners are there. So there are a few places where you do need to restore this, and then once the rivets are done, the fasteners are done, just polish it down. This I'm just using a fine emery board to get that polished down. Now we can continue on with the rest of the construction. The instructions will tell you to fit the upper halves of the wings onto the lower half of the wing, then fit it to the fuselage. Having built this kit a few times now, I find it better to do the lower wings first, get a good solid glue joint there, like wait for it to dry, and then install the upper halves. I find that this causes far fewer problems and gaps. But everything else can just really almost pops on dry fit, really. This kit is pretty decent in terms of its fit. So it goes together rather quickly. I mean, you can pretty much build most of the fuselage in an hour or two. So here we can fit on the upper halves of the wings. One of the things I do like about this little kit is it's a fairly accurate kit. So it actually has like the correct boxed in wheel wells. I've compared it to scale plans, and it size and shape wise it all matches up. Panel lines are roughly where they should be. It's decent little accurate kit. You do get options for both lowered and raised flaps. Again, I'm a big fan of options, so that's really nice. The rudder is posable. Again, pretty nice. And so here I'm just painting the cowling over the instrument panel. This gets a coat of black and then followed up by a light gray dry brush just to kind of pick out some of these details. And then finally I will go along with that leather color to do the trim around the edge. And I like doing these little types of details just because it kind of helps add little splashes of color to an otherwise monotonous cockpit. So here you can see I've installed the gun side glass already, and I waited to do it until I could install the canopy window so that it would be protected and my big clumsy fingers wouldn't accidentally knock it off. So here we're just getting this glued in, just ever so slight amount of Tamiya extra thin, and then we can mask off. So for this I'm using cellophane tape. On these really small scales I find the cellophane tape kind of the easiest to use because it's transparent. I can see where I'm cutting and what I'm cutting. And be sure that when you are doing canopy masking like this that you are using a brand new fresh blade. It will make your job so much easier and reduce the risk of ruining or scratching your clear parts. So you can see here I can get the full front canopy done with just one little piece of cellophane tape, and pretty straightforward. So I like it. And the cellophane tape isn't necessarily the best way of masking. There are better masking tapes out there, but it works on this application. You do get two canopies in this kit. They have slightly different profiles, so if you're looking for something like a very specific aircraft that you know what type of canopy it has, you have the option. I am using one canopy as a mask, and then I don't have to worry about getting paint on it, and then the other canopy will be the final canopy. So everything's ready and prepped for paint. We're going to hit everything with a nice coat of Mr. Surfacer 1500 in preparation for some metallic paint. Now, something I want to point out here about this build is I actually started this build back in 2022, and I started it in order to kind of use up some time that I had between two big projects. And I ended up putting it on the shelf because I was going to start the next big project that I was going to work on, and it just kind of sat there and it kind of languished. And then I lost some parts to it, and then so I was kind of discouraged, like, oh man, I really wanted to work on that. Um, and another thing too that happened here is you can see I'm applying this Vallejo metallic paint, and for whatever reason, it just did not work. And I really struggled with getting a nice good coat on this. And it's strange because this paint's never reacted like this before. I've used this paint multiple times across multiple projects, and I never had any issues. There's just really like, I can't even describe like how upset I was over how it was turning out. So we're going to take a little pause here because I ended up taking about an 8-month break at this point. So at this point, I was laying down the metallic paint, was not happy with it, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm gonna shelve it, and I'll come back to it later. So I ended up coming back to it a couple months ago, and really did not like how the metallic paint was looking. So I ended up sanding away most of the paint and primer, repriming it, and repainting it with Alclad. And turned out much better. I was way happier with how it turned out. But I was using this build as to kind of come back out of a bit of a, what's the modeling term for writer's block? Kind of a bit of a funk. And so I ended up building one of the 4 Mustangs off camera. So from now on, the footage you're going to see, you'll see 3 of the 4 airplanes that I worked on. I had already painted the 4th one, so you'll see the finished 4th one at the very end. So just know that while you'll only see 3 different paint jobs going on for the next portion of the video, I still was doing all 4 airplanes like together. So moving on now, we can actually see the continuation. So again, from the last footage you saw to this footage has been about 8 months here. So the 4 paint schemes. So I was doing the 3 paint schemes off the decal sheet, and then one airplane was going to be painted in the kit decals for the red tails. And so it was interesting because everything up until this point I was able to do everything the same, all 4 of them the same. But now I had to start branching off and doing individual different things for each aircraft because they all had very unique paint jobs. This one probably being the most complex, mainly just because I was using a lot of colors. There was a lot of different stuff going on, and this one had invasion stripes. And invasion stripes are still something that I find tricky and difficult. And I know there are people out there that will say, oh, well, you don't need to make invasion stripes perfect because they weren't perfect in real life. They were sloppy. They were usually painted on the night before the invasion. And that's all true, and I totally get it, but it's hard to sell a sloppy invasion stripe as something other than just not being very good at painting it. So I try to do well and to paint it nice enough. So painted everything, or I blocked it off, painted all the white. Now I can go in and do the black sections. It's always better to do dark over light when painting multiple layers of colors, or it's just easier. Takes less paint. I mean, you still can do it the other way around. You just have to have good light colors that go over dark colors. And so it's just a matter of getting the stripes painted, both sides, nice good color or coverage. And then once the painting is done, we can start removing the masking tape and see how well we did. And fortunately, this actually turned out really nice. I was really pleasantly surprised at how crisp and clean these lines came out. And again, I know that that's probably not technically historically accurate, but I like the look. And it really pleased that these turned out so well. This particular aircraft, so this is De Quake, that's the name of this aircraft. It had the yellow and green checker on the nose. Now the decals do provide a decal for this. However, they do not provide decals for the spinner, which are also supposed to be painted yellow and green. And I really struggle with doing like paint matching. So I kind of made the decision that I would just paint the whole thing, the checker, nose, and the spinner, so that the colors would all match. So I wouldn't have like 2 colors for the decals and then 2 colors for the spinners. I just knew that wasn't going to happen. So busted out the Tamiya paint here. So we had the flat yellow and now the flat green, and I learned this trick from another modeler, and I wish I remember who, because so I could give him credit. But basically, I'm just using this artist template to paint the spinner, because it was half yellow, half green, without having to tape it off and worry about getting like crazy, not getting it lined up correctly. So now we're going to move on to PD II. And this is a rather famous aircraft. The Blue Nose Mustangs were pretty famous as it was, but the PD aircraft were even within the Blue Nose were even famous. And truth be told, this is probably my least favorite of the four. I find the Blue Nose Mustangs kind of boring. I'm sure that's probably sacrilegious or something, but this one's just, of the four, this one's my least favorite. Not saying it's a bad one, it's just my least favorite. But for the blue, I'm using an ultramarine blue by Vallejo, and this paint just goes on so nice. I really like it, and I've used this blue on other projects before, and it is a great color to paint. And I don't know why it's any different than other Vallejo paints, but this just goes down really nice, really opaque, and it looks good. So now we're going to jump over to Lollipop. So this is the red tail Mustang, and I really wanted a nice vibrant bright red. So before painting the red, I decided to base coat all those areas with white. And this isn't like a full body white like I did the Invasion stripes. This is really just kind of like a general nice overcoat of white, just to give it a good light base to go from, because painting the red over the metallic ends up making the red look like a metallic red, and that just wasn't true to life for this particular aircraft. And so it was really necessary to do the white base. So now we can go over with our red color, and you'll be able to see how much it really kind of pops once I get a good couple coats on here. Another interesting thing about the red tails is that the landing gear covers were painted red, so that it's interesting and unique for this aircraft, and I kind of like it. So here you can see that red going on, and just how vibrant that red is. If you do a light coat, it kind of looks a little pinkish, but once you kind of get that second coat on there, that red really starts to pop, and that's how it should be. The red tails were very bright, and that was kind of their signature, and one of the things that made them very unique up in the air. So just wanted to make sure I got that right. And the tail was a little difficult to mask, just because it has that interesting curve, but in the end I was able to get it done well enough. So now we can do the theater stripes on the red tail Mustang, and again I'm using the Tamiya yellow here, and this does take a couple coats, but really after about 2 or 3 coats you get a nice good solid coverage. This is a great yellow to paint, and I'm really pleased with it. You have to make sure that you paint over the landing gear covers, because the yellow band did extend onto them. So here, the nice thing about this kit is the landing gear covers fit both open and closed. I mean, really, they're just basically press fit in there right now, and that makes doing this kind of work really easy and really nice. So get ourselves a nice good coat of yellow on here, and we can move on. So up next, we are going to be moving on to decals. So everything got a nice good coat of gloss, and now we can put our decals on. So all of the national insignia decals came from the kit decals, because the aftermarket decal sheet only provides one set of national markings, which is pretty standard. So pretty much anything that's common between all the Mustangs came from the kit decals, and then it's just the individual markings came from the aftermarket decals. So these all just get applied on. They get a little bit of water to help move them around, and once the decal is dried a little bit, then I go over the decals with some Walther's Solvaset, which really helps these decals snuggle down. I had 0 issues. So these are Eagle Cal decals, and I've used them before on different projects. Really like this company. They make good decals. They really snuggle down with a good coat of a Solvaset. And same thing with the Airfix decals. So this one here, this is the red tail, this is Lollipop. These are the kit decals, and they perform just as well. And now we can move on to kind of the final stages here. I wanted to matte coat a lot of the painted parts, so I really thinned down this matte coat by Outlaw Paints and sprayed it in the areas where there was paint, but tried to avoid the metallic areas so that I could maintain that metallic sheen. So it's just a matter of going around and carefully getting that paint applied, or the varnish applied, sorry, just to dull down all the shininess from the gloss coat. You'll also notice I did do a panel wash. I didn't record all that, but if you've seen pretty much all of my other aircraft build, you'll know how it works. And using the Ammo MIG dark brown wash for green vehicles. So just going around, getting everything with that matte coat and making sure that everything is nice and uniform and consistent. Trying to avoid the metallic areas. And if you get a little bit of overspray, that's okay, because it just kind of helps add a little bit of variety to the metallic coat. But really I wanted to try and maintain that shine. I wasn't going heavily weathered on these aircraft. And I think if I'd been building one, I would have taken a lot more time with the weathering and really going in with oils and stuff. But doing this quad build, I was pretty happy with how this was. Now we can remove the canopy masking, and I am very happy that even after 8 months, the tape came right off without any residue and really didn't cause any problems. So pretty happy with that. Doing a little bit of exhaust staining here from the engines as well as the guns, and this is really thinned black acrylic paint. So again, going really simple with the weathering, and now we can start looking like it's used. And again, if I were to concentrate on just one, I would definitely add a lot more like oil streaking and things like that using oil paints. But like I said, I'm pretty good with this. So now we can do the landing gear and all the details. This is probably the biggest problem with the Airfix kit, is the landing gear. It's really spindly. It's really weak. I've had them break on me before. So if you do build this kit, just be aware that those can be a bit of a struggle, and you need to be really careful with them. Here we are assembling all of the prop hubs for the aircraft and getting those installed. So here you can see that yellow and green. I'm just much happier with this than the decals would have done for me. So we can get canopies installed, start getting all the landing gear doors installed. All these last little bits, this is really when the build comes together and it really starts looking like a completed Mustang. The kit does not provide parts for the gear door actuators, so if you want to get more detailed, you could definitely scratch build those, as well as the landing light. It does not come with a landing light to put up in the landing gear wheel well that the D model Mustang had. So I'm putting some drop tanks on some of them, not all of them, and I stole some of the paper drop tanks out of my Academy kit to put on one of them as well. So we kind of have a mix of the 75-gallon drop tanks, the 100-gallon drop tanks, and no drop tanks. Final bits of detail painting are the navigation lights and the formation lights. These are just done with some acrylic paints and then with a little bit of gloss put on top. And here we go for the final reveal. So this was an interesting project. I mean, it almost took nearly a year to complete, not because the kits are difficult, but just because I had this big long period in between that I waited and tried to find my mojo to finish this build. But I'm really happy I did. And I like that each of these airplanes is unique and colorful, and they're all fairly well-known aircraft within the respective squadrons, and really tickled pink with the variety here. You can see I did make some simple bases to put all of these on, just to kind of help wrap it all up. And yeah, so like I said, the Airfix Mustang is one of my most favorite kits to build. If I really wanted to, I could power through one of these kits in less than a week, start to finish, and enjoy every second of it. So here's the reveal for the fourth Mustang that you didn't see before. It is Big Beautiful Doll. This is one of my favorite liveries for a Mustang. There's just something about that black and white checkered nose that really makes me happy here. So if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you sticking around and watching the video. If you're not a subscriber, I would urge you to hit the subscribe button and or like this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And a huge shout out to my patrons. I really appreciate their support, and we'll see you on the next video.